Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I am your host, Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about the Bashar al-Assad regime being toppled, Daniel Penny's acquittal, and more. But first, before we get started, please become a subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle, to access exclusive content. And also, you can follow us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. All right, so first to start off, listeners, I would like to say that we hope you have been enjoying the more frequent, shorter episodes. Past couple weeks, we've been doing weekly uploads for Conservative Conversations, and we hope you've been enjoying that. We're trying something new, so if you have, please let us know in the comments or in the review wherever you listen to the podcast or on YouTube. And we also hope you enjoyed last week's conversation with Manuel from the Stretch Goose podcast. It was definitely a good conversation with him yet again. So go check that out if you haven't heard it. And to start with the news, we'll start with some old news first. Last week, at the time that we're recording, Joe Biden pardoned his son Hunter Biden, which came as somewhat of a surprise to most people, since he had repeatedly said, and the White House spokesperson repeatedly said, he was not going to pardon Hunter Biden, but he did it anyway.
Well, it's not like Joe Biden's never lied before.
Right? I mean, when I first heard about it, I thought to myself, oh, okay. Well, I feel like was almost expected. I mean, it doesn't really surprise me that he did. What did come as a surprise to me, maybe a day or so later, after I learned more about it, was like the wide, sweeping blanket pardon he gave him for
almost 11 years.
Yeah, that crimes that may or may not have been committed, which I think was the more surprising part to most people.
Well, I love some of the analysis on that, because if you think about it, there's a lot of implications to Joe Biden himself, too, in that same time period.
Right.
And it's not like he has pardoned himself, even though there's a lot of talk of that, of maybe he's going to do pardons for himself and some other people within the government, so that way they can't be prosecuted once they get out.
Right.
They're calling them preliminary pardons.
Right.
But if you think about it, the whole 10% for the big guy, you're going to save 10% for the big guy. Well, that all came out of this 11-year time period.
Right.
And who was the big guy?
Well, one thing, I've been thinking about that quote a lot too lately, and one of the things that is usually omitted from the quote, because I don't think most people, and I'm not even going to quote it correctly, but I think there's a small part that usually gets forgotten. It's held by H for the big guy.
Yeah.
So, the assumption is
that's Hunter.
Yeah, H is Hunter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's...
So, there's definitely... Okay, we don't have the evidence. It's hard to sit here and say, there's definitely proof that they were working together. They were in cahoots. But, there's a very, very strong implication. As people who have followed the news, who have followed the story, from the inception of the whole, this is a Russian disinformation campaign.
Right, and the changing language on he did not have any knowledge of Hunter Biden's business dealings to he did not have any involvement, or whatever the order was.
Yeah.
Like how they kept moving the goalposts, as they would say.
So I think it's interesting. I don't really care about the Hunter pardon.
I don't really either. That's kind of like why I don't feel like I was too surprised by it.
Yeah.
I almost, at least in my opinion, it just kind of lends towards the corruption.
Well, and what
the perception of corruption that people have.
What I was going to finish by saying is I don't really care about the Hunter pardon, but I can't wait to see where this goes, because there are such strong implications that the president was involved, and I'd love to see that come to light.
Right.
Even though probably nothing's going to happen to Joe Biden either.
Right.
I just would love to know the truth. I would love for it to actually be published on the front page of the New York Times.
Right.
You know, Biden was involved with Hunter's corrupt dealings.
Right. I feel like that's something we've talked about before regarding various scandals of whoever it might be, that we at least would like the truth about it, whether or not something will actually get done, because in most cases, people would believe that nothing's going to happen to these people, but we would still like to know, as you're saying, the truth of it all.
Yeah. Well, and I still think the waters are so muddied that I think it's only going to matter to the people who want the truth, you know?
Yeah.
Because they'll still be able to play those clips, you know, from the ones, Biden's innocent, but it doesn't matter. Then we'll be able to play the ones from the Senate hearings that say, we uncovered the truth that Biden was involved.
Right.
So it's just going to aid the information warfare. But for the people who know how to get the truth and access the truth, I would love it to be out there, you know, and just say, he was guilty. He is guilty.
Yeah. Right. Well, I guess that kind of moves us on to some other news. The other big story since our last episode has been the devolution of Syria, or however you might want to say it. I think there's another word I'm looking for there. But things are not going well in Syria.
No. And I love this, too. I just want to get out in front of it and say, Tulsi was right. Okay? Because that's what I see as I watch the coverage of this. It's like, you know, they've been playing the old clip of her talking about Assad and how no matter how you feel about him, he is the president of Syria, and if any kind of peace deal is going to be created, he's got to be at the table.
Right.
Well, now he's missing in action, gone. And what hope is there now?
Right.
Of Syria, you know, of a good leader being put in place in Syria.
Right.
Probably a fat chance, and it's going to be pretty ugly for a little while.
Well, that kind of makes me think, at least what I've heard and understood about Bashar al-Assad, that he's definitely not a good guy. Nobody really wants him around, but the alternative is not any better there in Syria. So I think, from my understanding, that's part of the reason why nobody really wanted to topple that regime.
But if you look at it, though, like usual, we've played both sides.
Right, yeah.
And we've been backing these, what did they call them? Rebels or something. I can't think of what the phrasing is right now.
Yeah.
But we've been backing these moderate rebels. That's what it is. They were called moderate rebels. Well, come to find out, like I'm sure we knew all along, not we, but the powers that be, these moderate groups are not moderate.
Right.
They are terrorists. We've been funding terrorist organizations because we don't fully support Assad. And so now it's even in a bigger quagmire.
Right.
And you have Trump out saying we shouldn't be involved. Well, that's fine. I understand where he's coming from. I don't think we should be involved either. But when we're already up to our necks as far as involvement goes,
right. It's hard to swim out.
What's I don't understand. What's the path forward here?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's just another, issue in the fire that is the Middle East currently. And hopefully we'll start to see some turnaround in it.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's probably going to take a while.
Well, I just hope, in these last few days of the Biden administration, that he doesn't do anything to add fuel to the fire.
Right.
Because you have Trump saying stay out. Well, they're not going to listen to him.
Right. Yeah. I forget where else. I feel like I saw somebody talk about how of all people, Biden and Lindsey Graham have some kind of a agreement on this issue. I mean, maybe not like directly, like they've spoken to each other and agree, but their opinions are similarly aligned, whether we should get involved. But,
well, that's scary. That gives me chills.
I know. I mean, like, what? Name a war that Lindsey Graham hasn't wanted to be a part of.
Well, especially when you know that Syria was backed by Russia.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I mean, to do anything now, is going to be further poking the bear when we've got the Ukraine front going on, I won't even list everything, there's no point, but there's so much going on right now that to poke at Putin from a different angle just sounds like a potential for, a real mess, especially when you've just had him firing ICBMs for the first time.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a tense situation, and seems to be getting worse because we thought it might slowly start to get better as we're transitioning to Trump's administration, but of course that in itself doesn't mean everything's going to go well. But we'd hoped for better. But,
and there still is hope.
Right.
I just hope that
it's true.
Biden's clock will run out pretty quickly.
Right.
Before he, does anything foolish.
Mm-hmm. Right. I was browsing the news across the web section on our website to try to get some ideas.
On contemporaryconservative.net?
Yeah, it's right on contemporaryconservative.net. And one of the headlines I saw, but I didn't click on to read the article, but it was about how some Democrats are upset with Joe Biden for seeming to cede control to Trump over some of these foreign affair issues that are going on right now.
Well,
in a way,
to me, that whole comment that you just made, I understand it's not coming from you. You're hearing it from people on the left, but it's just so ironically funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's been weekend at Bernie's his whole administration.
Right.
So, and now President Trump, I mean, whether you're on the left side or not, I'm going to say this. He had a mandate.
Mm-hmm.
He has a mandate.
Right.
So I think that's exactly what should be done, is for Biden to just sit back. It's like I just said,
right.
Why start a war within 30 days of your, administration running out?
Right.
If you can't acknowledge, okay, no, let's just play neutral for 30 days and let the next guy have it. I mean, that's only fair.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, Trump was at the reopening of Notre Dame, over in France, and then from some of the analysis and commentary I've seen, he got a pretty warm welcome from some of the same people who had heavily criticized him in his first term.
Well, absolutely, and I'm glad that you bring that up because, I mean, we've seen Trump as president-elect pretty much being president already.
Yep.
All these world leaders have come to meet him. He met with the new NAFTA people. The president of Mexico has stepped up and is going to do all this stuff because she doesn't want the 25% tariff.
Right. Trudeau
just came and met him
at Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
They don't want the 25% tariff.
Right.
Which, remind me in a minute. I want to revisit that tariff discussion and him at Mar-a-Lago, but I'd like to finish this point first. That, yes, I mean, you just saw him with Macron, and it was so funny watching them interact because you can tell that they're both trying to dominate each other. They're both trying to get the upper hand. They both, want to look like the bigger man in the photo shoot. And to me, that's so funny to watch some little French guy.
Yeah.
I'll try to be nice with my words, but some little frog try to get the upper hand on Trump. Well, it didn't work.
Right.
But it was so funny trying to watch him try.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you can just tell Trump is just dominating already. And Biden has never been very effective. Now, you can argue with me on that. I think you certainly could argue, but in my opinion, I know what I'm saying. He's never been very effective. He's kind of a joke Biden. He definitely has been for 4 years.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just so funny to see him in any way try to assert dominance right now with 30 whatever days it is left on the clock.
Right.
I think he would just come off as even more of a joke. So I think in a way it's wise for him to just stay in the background, stay in the shadows. Mm-hmm. It shows a sort of political savvy that Biden does have.
Right.
But I also think it's fair. I think he's being fair to Trump in a manner of speaking. I hope I don't end up eating those words, but
right. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting to see how, despite their criticisms of Trump in the past, they're certainly open and seemingly eager for him to come back in some way to work with him again. Because it almost appears, certainly I don't know for sure, but it appears that they were dissatisfied working with the Biden administration. They're ready to get a move on.
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking about this from the shower while I was taking a shower this morning, but I'm pretty sure. Do you remember a phrase? I'm pretty sure it was Obama, but he said he was talking about how America is going to lead from behind.
Oh, yeah.
This goes way back to like 2008 or something like that. But I feel that that's the way Biden has been leading too, is we're going to lead from behind. We're going to let everybody else run ahead, go ahead, and we'll just, basically give commentary and tell people what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong from behind. Right. We're not really going to lead the world.
And then attempt to sweep up the pieces if necessary.
Yeah. And it's like, it's probably best. I mean, there's probably a bunch of ways to look at this, but I think, considering that basically the whole globe operates off of the U.S. dollar, basically the whole globe is protected by the U.S. military, I think it makes sense to have strong American leadership that leads from the front.
Right. Right. I mean, because everybody else is depending on us.
That's exactly
for
right.
For better or for worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't mind, I'll circle back.
Yeah, I was about to remind you.
Okay. Well, there was a lot of talk. There has been a lot of talk about Trump's tariffs, the tariff wars, how it's going to raise prices here in America, how Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, and all these people who want him to raise tariffs are idiots, are shooting themselves in the foot and all this because all of our goods and services and everything is going to go up. Well, I've heard some great discussion around this, and I've done some decent research into it and everything. And yeah, I want to say that I don't think that it is a cure-all to just raise tariffs across the board, on everybody, whatever.
Right. And
if you really look at it from like both a macro and micro perspective, it is going to raise prices on lots of stuff here.
Right.
But one of the things that I think that the naysayers haven't taken into consideration is something that you saw come out of this Mar-a-Lago meetup with Trudeau. Because Trudeau's sitting there almost playing hardball and saying, well, we can't afford this. We can't afford a 25% tariff. There's no way. And they almost want to go, and you can't afford it either. America can't afford this either. Well, guess what? If it's going to hurt Canada, you see what I'm saying? Imagine how it's going to hurt everybody. If Canada can't afford it, then Mexico can't afford it. The UK can't afford it. Russia can't afford it. China can't afford it. There's no way.
Right.
If it's going to hurt us a little bit, think of how badly that's going to hurt the other nations.
Right.
So you betcha. It's a lot of talk. It's not economically sound necessarily. But oh my gosh, is it a bargaining tool?
Right.
Because what have you seen? You've seen these people run to the table to meet with Trump.
Yeah.
They know that their economies can't take this. Trump knows that the American economy can't take it.
Right.
But you know what? We can take it longer than they can.
Right.
And my eyes have totally been open to that, because there's so much conjecture out there. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Well, when you watch the leaders come running down to meet Trump, like the price is right.
Yeah, that's kind of why I emphasized when we were talking about Trudeau coming to Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
He came all the way to Mar-a-Lago to talk to Trump.
So please, somebody out there smarter than me, tell me how this is a bad thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it'd be one thing if, Trump saw tariffs as the end-all, be-all economic fix for, everything. But that's not the case. He's talking about using them strategically.
As a bargaining chip.
Right. I mean, because one of the complaints is, especially with, China, is China heavily subsidizes their, EV market and other industries in their country to the point that they can sell their EVs so cheap they're undercutting the market here in America.
Well, it's part of their long-term strategy.
Right.
To bankrupt us.
Right. Where they might not necessarily be able to compete with a lower price if they weren't being subsidized by the Chinese market and undercutting the prices here. So if you use the tariffs to make it more costly for China just to dump their cheap EVs into our market, it's going to make it harder for them to sell their cheap EVs in our country. And another thing that they've been talking about is this the Nippon Steel buying U.S. steel. That's been a big thing. The Japanese company. Have you heard much about this?
No, but it doesn't surprise me at all whatsoever.
Right. I mean, I understand some people's arguments on why they wouldn't want to, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing because U.S. Steel hasn't been making money, and ideally, if this Japanese company bought them, they'd be able to make it a profitable steel company.
Well, and I can tell you, I like the idea slightly because I know the Japs are a lot more particular about their quality than we are.
Right.
So I'd love to see that. I mean, if the steel is going to be used in an American market,
right,
I'd love it to jump up a standard. That'd be great. Right. I think so.
Because part of what Trump wants to use the tariffs for is to make it a level playing field. Because if, say, it was the reverse role, Nippon Steel, the Japanese company, was about to go belly up or whatever, was in dire straits, and U.S. Steel wanted to buy them, it is not very likely the Japanese government would approve that sale.
Right.
Because the Japanese government would rather own their own steel company, which is what we're trying to do here. Yes, we'd rather own our own steel company, which I suppose is a fair argument, but I'm somebody who believes in more of a free market and just trying to protect the U.S. Steel company because it's a U.S. company and just keep subsidizing it, with tax dollars is not really the way to go.
Well, and I think, obviously it's still going to be headquartered here.
Right.
It's still going to have American workers.
Yeah.
It's still going to pay, into Social Security, into Medicare, into Medicaid, into whatever. Those workers are still going to have to pay their income taxes and all that. So I don't see it as a huge deal or problem.
Sure, right.
And I actually think there could be some good benefits from it. Like I said, the higher quality of product, higher standards as far as production and all this.
Right.
I think it could be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely could be, for sure. But that's just to kind of be related to some of the tariff talk and some of the more protectionism, as it's been called. A lot of people relate those things. But I suppose we can move on to one of our last topics of news that just broke today as we're recording. Daniel Penny, the gentleman who had the case in New York where he tried to subdue a person on the subway who was acting erratic and trying to protect the people on the subway. And the gentleman eventually died.
He wasn't just acting erratic, though. He was like,
right.
I would definitely put in the thing about how he was making threats, like, threatening violence against the passengers and stuff.
Sure.
So, yes, he was acting erratically, but he was also making direct personal threats of harm.
Right. Well, right, you're correct. But anyway, Daniel Penny had put him in a chokehold or a submission hold to try to subdue him, and he later had passed away due to related injuries, and I might be simplifying that. But anyway, Daniel Penny was acquitted on both his charges today. He was originally charged with, I believe, second-degree murder, and negligent homicide was the other charge, I believe.
Yep.
And in a surprise move last week, the second-degree homicide charge was dropped because the jury couldn't come to a consensus on that.
I thought it was the other way. I thought the first charge was dropped.
No, the lesser charge is one that they stuck with, and which was the one that they acquitted on today.
The negligent homicide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the first charge?
I believe it was second-degree homicide.
Yeah. Okay.
But in either case, he has been acquitted of all charges, and will not be facing any prison time for this. And a lot of people are happy for this result because some people think that he was being unfairly prosecuted for trying to protect other citizens. But you wanted to make a comparison to something else.
I sure did.
Yes.
I see a big comparison to the Kyle Rittenhouse case.
Yes.
And I do see this as a victory, for our rights here in America, our right to self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I see an element of the Good Samaritan law, in this. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for this case, to just sit and watch it. Not part of the jury or part of the proceedings or anything, but I would have loved to have actually been in the room and to hear all the pieces from the trial.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't feel that I'm super duper knowledgeable on this case.
Right.
But I am thankful that the jury acquitted. And although guns weren't involved,
right,
I think this is a big win for self-defense. And from the pieces that I did hear, this Penny was conscious about what he was doing. When he was holding the guy down, he wasn't trying to strangulate him or anything. He said over and over he could feel the guy breathing and all this. Apparently, you can even see it on the video, what video there was. You can see his chest still rising and falling. Supposedly, from the coroner's report, there were several factors that contributed to this man's death. And it wasn't just being held in this manner, but it was supposedly he was on drugs. The drugs had something to do with it, and there are other elements as well. But I do know from the reporting that I've heard that there were drugs involved, which reminds you of the George Floyd case.
Right, exactly what I was just thinking about as you're saying that.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It's interesting, and again, I'll say I wish I knew more, but I think there are a lot of parallels to other cases, and I think it's good to see self-defense and the right to act as a good Samaritan be defended here in this country.
Yep, exactly. I think so too, and there were reports of the other people on the subway being appreciative that Daniel Penny had stepped in to save them, essentially.
Right.
So yeah, this is good news for Daniel Penny and for, like you were saying, self-defense cases and the right to defend yourself and to protect others in dangerous situations.
Right. And I think, another thing that I just would like to throw in there is another thing that's really important in our country when it comes to law is intent.
Mm-hmm.
And if this Penny person had ill intent that day, that would have come to light. in the trial. You know what I mean? There are things like that that are easy to see. Why, if his intention, and he had the ability, the physical ability, to take this man down and kill him, it probably wouldn't have taken as long. You know, it wouldn't have been as long of an ordeal. You know what I'm saying? If his intent was just to take this guy out, I think you would have seen that. It would have been clear. It would have, you know, so.
I mean, I'm sure maybe I wouldn't want to say I'm sure, but Daniel Penny was a former military person, so I would suspect he may know how to do so quickly if that was his intent.
Well, exactly. And that's why I also compared to the Rittenhouse case, because Rittenhouse had been there as a volunteer. He'd been working with the paramedics and with some of the firefighters and, you know, some of the good people trying to keep order in Kenosha.
Right.
He wasn't just there to go
hunt people down.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
No way. And so you have to look at somebody's intent, you know? And when you compare the two in this Penny case, I mean, you have a guy who's just off his rocker, whether he's on drugs or he's mentally ill or what it is, ranting and raving and getting in people's faces saying he's going to kill them, going to hurt them, going to do things to them.
Right.
Then you have another guy who just physically restrains the Looney Tune character. Come on. Who's got the ill intent? The one who is a menace to the public, or the person who wants to restrain the public menace?
Yeah.
So I just think sometimes these things are pretty cut and dry, and I'm glad the jury could see it that way.
Exactly. And I guess with that, we will move briefly into our exclusive topic. So if you'd like to hear that, please become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle. You can find a link in the show notes. But that is all I have. Is that all you got for this week?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this conservative conversation. And if you did, please go subscribe on our YouTube channel. You just search at Conservative Conversations 92. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and many more. And as I mentioned, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host to access extra content and extra segments in episodes.
That's right. And we hope you might mention us to a friend or a relative or someone like that in your life who shares your politics or, you know, would be interested in this content. And as always, we thank you for listening.